Sea salt ice cream. It's one of the two staple foods in the Kingdom Hearts series, but at its core, is it really just a bar of sweet and salty goodness on a stick? Or does it have some kind of deeper meaning? I'm inclined to believe so, and I think everyone else who's been paying attention does too, but for the people outside the hardcore fanbase looking in, you're probably asking yourself, what's the deal with all that ice cream? There is, after all, a whole game where like 75% of the cutscenes are of the main characters eating it. I guess we should start with the reason such a particular flavor of ice cream was selected. Tetsuya Nomura, the series director, was visiting Disneyland one day and just so happened to try the sea salt flavor of ice cream that was being served there. He liked it so much that he decided to include it in the game series going forward and made it a staple starting with Kingdom Hearts 2. The main character associated with the snack is Roxas, someone whom many of us didn't know much about prior to the time of Kingdom Hearts 2, and that's mostly because many of us neglected to finish Chain of Memories on the Game Boy before its release, myself included. From what we can gather during the 7 days we play as him in the prologue segment, Roxas is a boy who loves sleeping in, throwing sticks at strangers, and hanging out with other kids in this random alley they call the usual spot. These friends of his are Hayner the leader, Pence the comedic relief and conspiracy theorist, and Alette the female. No, really, now I'm kind of questioning, has Alette even done anything? Anyway, these kids are so relatable. They put off their homework until the last minute, doing chores around their neighborhood for spare change, but by far their favorite activity of all, as a collective group, is sitting atop the station clock tower eating the savory looking treat known as sea salt ice cream. They end up almost every day eating it and talking about their feelings, their hopes, and plans for the future, all while consuming this delectable treat. This would become the blueprint for a lot of what we're going to be discussing going forward, so be sure to keep it in mind. Moving right along, we know that weird stuff starts happening, especially on the third or fourth day when Roxas is confronted by a mysterious man in a black coat claiming to know him. We don't know much about this Axel person besides what we saw of him in Chain of Memories, and we don't know how he's connected to Roxas either. But then another mysterious figure shows up named Diz, and he's saying that this other guy is just talking nonsense. But Roxas and us, the player, don't know who this guy really is either, and we don't know who to trust. But before we can decide, the glitch in the Matrix suddenly ends, and we wouldn't see Axel again for a little while longer. In every instance that we got to see him and Roxas interact for the rest of the game, there's this sense of bitterness and animosity, but also longing that we the player don't really get. Roxas doesn't either. Take for instance this moment where Roxas pretends to remember his past. You can see the hope in Axel's eyes flare up for just a moment, only to simmer down once he realizes that Roxas really doesn't remember. And one last interaction before we move on to the next game I wanted to bring up was that when Axel saves Sora from the nobody swarm in the dark corridors, his dying words say that Roxas made him feel like he had a heart, putting the nail in the coffin that these two were very close one way or another. We know these two have a history now, but what that might entail would remain mostly a mystery until 2009 when we finally received Kingdom Hearts 358/2. Marketed as a game that would focus on telling the story of Roxas and his days in the organization, this game was highly anticipated by many in the fandom. We would finally have the answers to our Axel and Roxas questions that we had been asking for the past 3 years. In the beginning, Roxas is shown to make quick friends with Axel after they complete the tutorial mission, appropriately named the icing on the cake. To end off the mission, the two sit atop the very same tower we saw Roxas have ice cream with the Hayner, Pence, and Olette crew, and Axel introduces him to his favorite treat, sea salt ice cream, which he offers to Roxas as a sort of reward for a job well done. Kind of like a senior would do to initiate a new recruit. And later on down the line, Roxas would make another friend in the form of Xion. He would then perform this very same act of kindness with her after a successful mission together where they went to the same exact spot on the very same tower, and better yet, she has the exact same reaction that Roxas does to having it for the first time. Eventually, this would become an after-work ritual for all three of them, and it would literally happen after almost every mission. Some people may find this monotonous and weird, but for some reason, I just never really felt that way. It's taken me a long time to put this into words, but now I'm ready to break it down for all of you. This is where the video really begins. There's a few very common reasons one might eat some ice cream. You'd probably best enjoy it when you're with some friends or family on a hot summer afternoon. This is of course not the only time you'd have ice cream. Hell, I'll have it whenever I want, no matter what the temperature. But there's an honest difference between me having it now than having it back then. As an adult, I can have whatever ice cream I want whenever I want because I make adult money and literally nobody can stop me. It's still delicious, but it's not quite the same as it was when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, my parents would buy these big bags of ice pops that were pretty cheap. They weren't very, gourmet or anything, and they came in this very plain plastic tubing. The flavor would always be sweet and it tasted fine, but it was definitely not the premium stuff. However, that doesn't really matter. When it's hot outside and you are tired from running around all day, you really don't care. You just want something to cool off and relax with your friends with. And honestly, that's what made those ice pops taste so elite. They were a nice way of capping off a day of playing and were a staple of my summer days and nights. Because just like in the game, ice cream can be a good remedy to make someone's day go from bad to at least a little better. In most instances, Roxas will always be eating the chilling confection with either Axel, Xion, or both. And other times still, he's just eating it by himself. No matter what day it is, no matter what happens with or without his friends, he always finds himself in this same spot with a bar of it in his hand. But why is that? Well, it's because to Roxas, the ice cream is all he has to associate these feelings that he doesn't really understand. That feeling being happiness and closeness with other human beings. Nobody's. Which is again why this line in particular is not the least bit corny when you realize what he's trying to convey. As one of his closest friends lay dying in his arms, he cannot physically put into words what Xion means to him. He cannot say how she makes him feel, so he simply says that if she goes, who else will have ice cream with him? After all, his only other friendship is in pieces, so all Roxas can do is try his best to fulfill his friend's dying wish. Have you ever cried so hard to the point where you got that bitter taste in your mouth? I definitely have. We all have at moments that just make us sad, but I'm sure we can also remember some moments that made us stop and think to ourselves that, damn, my life is just so sweet. Can you tell where I'm going with this? If not, let me just spell it out for you. Sea salt ice cream is salty, but sweet too.
I already told you before. Get it memorized.
Just like how life can be salty and bitter, it can also be full of sweet moments too. To you, dear viewer, I'm not sure what it is you're going through right now, but if you'll let me, I'd like to give you this bar of ice cream and a little bit of advice. Life is worth living for those sweet moments, so no matter how many bad ones stand between you and those moments, I hope you keep on going back for another bite. I hope this video wasn't too cheesy. It definitely is hard to do heartfelt videos in today's society without being made fun of, but I really do mean every word. And I just want to say thank you for watching. Please consider supporting the channel by subscribing and maybe sharing it with a friend who needs a warm sunset and some company right now. I've been Key, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.